At 6:14 on a Saturday evening, Dr. Evelyn Bennett saw the daughter she had erased from every family story sitting at table 2. The wedding reception had only just begun. Beyond the tall windows of the Newport Hotel, the Atlantic had turned silver beneath a fading September sky. Inside, crystal glasses caught the candlelight. A string quartet played near the terrace doors, and 200 guests spoke in the softened voices people used around wealth. Claire sat beside her husband in a navy dress chosen precisely because it invited no attention. The only unusual thing she wore was an old silver watch, its face scratched and its narrow band polished smooth by decades of use. Across the ballroom, Evelyn stopped smiling. She placed her champagne on a server's tray and turned to the wedding planner. Her voice remained controlled, but it carried farther than she intended. "Who put that woman at table 2? Claire heard her. Several guests glanced over, then looked away, pretending not to recognize cruelty when it wore good manners. Even after 9 years, her mother would not call her by name. 9 years earlier, that name had already been engraved beneath an empty frame. The Bennett home in Westbridge, Massachusetts, had an upstairs hallway the family jokingly called the Legacy Wall. There were medical degrees belonging to Claire's great-grandfather, her grandfather, and 2 uncles. Her father's cardiology certification hung beside her mother's Harvard Medical School diploma. At the far end was a newly prepared space for Madeline, Claire's older sister, who had just been admitted to medical school. Beside it hung a 12th frame. It contained no diploma, only cream paper and a brass plaque. Claire Elizabeth Bennett, M.D., pending. Evelyn had ordered it when Claire was 16. Nobody asked whether that future had ever been hers. Claire did not hate medicine. As a child, she had spent afternoons in her parents' hospital offices, doing homework while physicians passed in and out. She admired their knowledge, but she noticed different things. She remembered which patient was frightened of needles, which widow pretended to understand instructions because she was embarrassed to ask again, and which elderly man needed someone to wait until his daughter arrived. Her parents called that sensitivity. Her grandmother Eleanor called it a gift. Eleanor Brooks had worked night shifts as a nurse for 38 years. She had no framed diploma on the Bennett wall. Evelyn described her career with the faintly apologetic phrase, "My mother was in nursing," as if explaining an old family hardship. Madeline had learned the family rules more successfully. 4 years older than Claire, she earned perfect grades, spoke confidently at charity dinners, and never questioned the future planned for her. Evelyn displayed Madeline's medical school acceptance letter on the mantel before Madeline had decided where to attend. At Claire's high school graduation dinner, Evelyn raised her glass. "To the final physician of this Bennett generation," she announced, "and to the day we fill that last frame." Richard smiled. Madeline lifted her glass. Eleanor watched Claire. Claire's acceptance to a prestigious pre-med program lay unopened in her bedroom. In her purse was a brochure for a community college nursing program and a handwritten description of a geriatric care course she had visited without telling anyone. Her heart beat so hard she felt it in her throat. "I don't want to go to medical school," she said. The room became still. Evelyn lowered her glass carefully. "You're nervous. That's normal." "I'm not nervous. I want to study nursing. I want to work with older adults, especially after they leave the hospital." Madeline stared at her plate. Richard cleared his throat but said nothing. Evelyn folded her hands. She did not shout. Her composure was more frightening than anger. "You want to assist doctors instead of becoming one?" "I want to care for people in the part of their lives everyone keeps overlooking." "Nurses provide valuable support," Evelyn said, using the diplomatic tone she reserved for hospital boards. "But you were given opportunities women in this family fought generations to have." "I know, but their dream doesn't have to be mine." Richard finally spoke. "Claire, perhaps we should discuss this after dinner." "We are discussing it now," Evelyn said. Only Eleanor looked directly at Claire. There was sadness in her face, but beneath it, unmistakable pride. Evelyn leaned back. "Are you asking for time to reconsider? Or are you rejecting this family?" Claire looked at the empty frame, then at the woman who had mistaken a plan for love. I'm choosing my own life. Evelyn rose, walked to the dining room doors, and closed them. Then, she said, "You'll learn what that life costs." The next morning, Evelyn summoned Claire to the study at 8. Nothing about the room suggested a family crisis. Sunlight crossed the Persian rug. Coffee waited on a silver tray. Richard stood by the window in his weekend sweater, while Madeline sat rigidly on the leather sofa. Evelyn had arranged them as carefully as she arranged everything else. On the desk were 2 folders. "You have 2 choices," Evelyn said. "You can honor your commitment to the pre-med program, or you can pursue this nursing idea independently." Independently means what? You'll move out. You'll pay your tuition and living expenses. We will not finance a decision that damages this family's reputation. Claire looked at her father. "Do you agree with this?" Richard rubbed his thumb along the edge of his watch. "Give your mother a few days. Tell her you're reconsidering." He was offering her a lie, not protection. "I'm not reconsidering." Evelyn opened the first folder. Inside was a statement for the college fund established when Claire was a child. The balance was a little more than $80,000. "The 529 account belongs to us," she said, "since you will not use it for its intended purpose. We are changing the beneficiary to Madeline." Madeline looked up. "I didn't ask for that." Claire held her sister's gaze. "Will you refuse it?" Madeline's eyes moved toward their mother. Madeline slowly lowered her eyes but said nothing at all. Evelyn pushed the second folder forward. It contained apartment listings near the community college. "I am not punishing you," she said. "Adults accept the consequences of their decisions. You're asking me to become homeless because I chose a respected profession you consider embarrassing." For the first time, Evelyn's composure cracked. "I am asking you not to throw away everything this family built." Claire understood then that her mother was not afraid she would fail. Evelyn was afraid Claire would succeed by a definition she could not control. By evening, Claire had packed 2 suitcases, a box of books, and the winter coat she had bought with money from a summer job. She left trophies, childhood photographs, and the unopened pre-med acceptance packet behind. Eleanor arrived after dark carrying a grocery bag. "Your mother told me you needed space," she said. "She told me I needed to leave." Eleanor closed her eyes briefly. "That sounds more like her." The bag held sandwiches, fruit, toiletries, and an envelope containing $300. Claire tried to return the cash, knowing her grandmother lived on a nurse's pension. "Take it," Eleanor said. "Pride won't pay a security deposit." Then she removed the silver watch from her wrist. Claire had seen it in every childhood memory of her grandmother, measuring pulses, marking medication times, and shining beneath hospital lights when Eleanor held someone's hand. "This isn't expensive," Eleanor said, "but it counted thousands of hours no one put on a plaque. It counted the minutes we waited for fevers to break and the nights I sat with people whose families couldn't get there in time." She fastened it around Claire's wrist. "Your mother thinks a title tells the world what a life is worth. This watch taught me that worth is what you do when no one important is watching." Claire's eyes filled. "I can't take this." Eleanor folded Claire's fingers over the scratched face. "Take it, not so you'll remember me. So you'll remember yourself." Richard drove Claire to a rented room near the community college. He discussed traffic. At the curb, he kept both hands on the steering wheel. "Your mother may calm down if you prove this isn't a phase." "And if it isn't?" He looked through the windshield. "Then I don't know." That was the moment Claire stopped seeing him as the kinder parent. Kindness without courage had still left her carrying boxes alone. She climbed out. By the time she reached the building entrance and turned around, his car was gone. Her room contained a narrow bed, a dented dresser, and a window facing a brick wall. Claire unpacked Eleanor's food but could not eat. At 11:30, she called home. The call went to voicemail. She imagined her mother listening from the kitchen, waiting for an apology. Claire almost gave her one. She almost promised to return to pre-med, fill the 12th frame, and become welcome again. Instead, she ended the call without leaving a message. The next morning, Claire enrolled in a state-approved nursing assistant program. She found a cafeteria job beginning at 5 and an evening shift at an assisted living facility. She was frightened, underfunded, and more alone than she had ever been. But when she checked the time, Eleanor's watch was still running. The Bennett door had closed behind her. Claire did not yet know that 9 years later, another door would open in the middle of Madeline's wedding, and this time, she would refuse to be sent away. Claire learned quickly that caring for people was less graceful than the brochures suggested. Her nursing assistant program taught her how to take vital signs, prevent falls, move patients without injuring them, and recognize changes that required a licensed nurse. It could not prepare her for the first time a frightened woman struck her during a dementia episode, or for the shame of a proud man who needed help using the bathroom. At the assisted living facility, Claire worked under nurses who were responsible for too many residents and beside aides who had learned to survive by moving quickly. She understood why. There were call lights blinking, meal trays cooling, families asking questions, and always another person waiting. Still, she refused to let speed turn people into tasks. Names mattered to her. Arthur Bell tested that promise. He was 76, a retired machinist recovering from a mild stroke. His left hand no longer obeyed him, and he hated anyone noticing. He refused showers, insulted the food, and dismissed 3 aides in 2 days. On Claire's first morning with him, Arthur threw his shirt across the room. "If you're here to dress me like a child, leave." Claire picked up the shirt but did not approach him. "What part gives you trouble?" "All of it." She waited. Finally, he muttered, "The buttons." Instead of fastening them for him, Claire found a button hook in the therapy room. She demonstrated once, then placed it in Arthur's good hand. His first attempts failed. The metal slipped. His face reddened. Claire resisted the urge to take over. Nearly 10 minutes later, the first button passed through its hole. Arthur stared at it. "You're the first person who helped me without making me feel helpless," he said. That evening, Claire wrote the sentence in a notebook. She worked mornings and weekends while completing prerequisites for an associate nursing degree. Some nights she slept in her car between a late shift and an early class. She washed uniforms at a laundromat while memorizing anatomy and calculated medication dosages during cafeteria breaks. Eleanor called every Sunday. She never asked whether Claire intended to reconcile with her parents. She asked whether Claire had eaten, whether she was sleeping, and what she had learned that week. Claire mailed home 3 cards over 2 years, one after completing her nursing assistant certification, one when she entered nursing school, and one at Christmas. None received an answer. Madeline sent a single text. "Mom tells people you wanted distance. I don't know what you expect me to say." Claire typed a long response explaining that being expelled was not the same as asking for distance. She deleted it. She told herself silence was maturity, though part of her was simply afraid of being rejected again. At 21, Claire passed her licensing examination and became a registered nurse. She accepted a position coordinating care for older patients leaving the hospital. The work revealed a gap no textbook had described. A patient could be medically stable yet unable to climb the stairs to his apartment. A widow could understand her prescriptions in the hospital, then confuse 6 bottles when she got home alone. Families heard "discharged" and assumed the crisis was over. Too often, those patients returned to the emergency department within days. Arthur returned home during Claire's first year as an RN. His son lived in Ohio, so Claire arranged transportation, meal delivery, and in-home assistance. The care agency canceled twice. On the second night, Arthur called because he had fallen beside his bed. He was uninjured but too frightened to sleep. Claire stayed on the phone until help arrived. "Hospitals know how to send people home," Arthur said. "Nobody seems to know how to help them stay there." The words followed her. Claire began accepting extra shifts, convinced every uncovered need was personally hers to fill. Once, after working 16 hours, she fell asleep in her car and missed a pharmacology review session. Maria Alvarez, an experienced RN who coordinated the unit, found her staring at the failed quiz the next day. "You cannot rescue everyone by destroying yourself," Maria said. "I'm just tired." Compassion without boundaries becomes another way to abandon yourself. Claire understood the sentence intellectually. Living by it would take years. One night, she sat alone in a 24-hour diner with discharge reports spread beside cold coffee. On a paper napkin, she wrote, "Hospital to home, no one falls through the gap." Below it, she tried several names: Safe Harbor, Homeward, Second Door. Then she wrote 3 words: Haven, Bridge, Home. Claire circled them. For the first time since leaving Westbridge, she was no longer imagining how to earn her way back into the Bennett family. She was imagining what she could build for people who had nowhere safe to return. At 23, Claire signed the lease on an office above a laundromat and called it HavenBridge Home Care. The space had one window, stained carpet, and a radiator that clanged whenever the heat came on. Claire furnished it with a folding table, 2 used chairs, and a filing cabinet whose bottom drawer refused to close. She had $12,000 in savings and a $35,000 microloan secured with a personal guarantee. It was enough to begin, but not enough to make many mistakes. HavenBridge initially provided non-medical support for older adults returning home, help with bathing and meals, transportation to appointments, companionship, and reminders based on plans created by licensed clinicians. Claire's promise was simple: we will not leave someone alone on the first night home. The promise was easier to print on a brochure than to keep. During the first month, a caregiver quit 30 minutes before an overnight shift. Claire covered it herself, then returned to the office to complete payroll. One family delayed payment. Another accused an aide of stealing a bracelet that was later found beneath a sofa cushion. Claire wanted to believe good intentions could solve every conflict. They could not. She gave too many second chances to an employee who arrived late. She reduced bills for families without calculating whether she could still pay wages. When an inspection found a missing signature in a client file, HavenBridge narrowly avoided a formal penalty. Maria arrived at the office the following morning with coffee and a stack of policy templates. "You need systems," she said. "I need 3 more versions of myself." "No, one of you is already too many." Maria agreed to become HavenBridge's clinical director. Together, they created background check procedures, training requirements, incident reports, on-call schedules, and clear boundaries between non-medical caregivers and licensed nursing services. When Claire hesitated to dismiss the chronically late employee, Maria reminded her that kindness toward one unreliable worker could become cruelty toward a vulnerable client. Claire ended the employment that afternoon. She cried afterward in the supply closet, then covered a client visit because they were still short-staffed. For months, HavenBridge survived one invoice at a time. Claire drove a used Honda with more than 150,000 miles on it. She answered calls at midnight, delivered groceries when winter storms closed the roads, and kept a sleeping bag beneath her desk. Some weeks she paid herself less than the caregivers. The first meaningful break came from a hospital social worker who remembered Claire from her discharge coordination job. St. Catherine Medical Center needed support for 5 older patients considered at high risk of returning to the emergency department. HavenBridge was offered a 90-day trial. They visited every home before discharge. They checked stairways, food supplies, bathroom safety, transportation, and whether family members understood what help the patient actually needed. They did not replace physicians, therapists, or home health nurses. They made sure the plans those professionals created could survive contact with real life. 4 of the 5 patients completed the trial without an avoidable readmission. The 5th returned to the hospital, but because a HavenBridge caregiver recognized confusion and called for help. Doctors treated his infection before it became life-threatening. St. Catherine extended the contract. 5 caregivers became 14, then 30. Claire rented the office beside the laundromat and hired a night scheduler. Later, HavenBridge opened a second location. Growth brought new problems: insurance, payroll, training, and the fear that expansion might weaken their standards. She kept her original folding table even after Maria ordered proper desks. Sentimental clutter, Maria called it. Historical evidence, Claire replied. A local business magazine published a short profile titled The Nurse Bridging the Journey Home. Claire bought 2 copies. She framed one for the office and placed the other in an envelope addressed to her parents. For 3 days, it sat beside the outgoing mail. Then Claire put it in her desk drawer. She told herself she no longer cared whether Evelyn knew. The unopened envelope suggested otherwise. Eleanor called after reading the article online. I am proud of you, she said. Then, after a pause, but I need to ask something. Claire waited. Are you building this because people need it? Or because you still hope your mother will see you? Claire looked around the office. Beyond the wall, washing machines turned beneath the floor, creating a steady vibration. Can it be both? For a while, Eleanor said, but one reason will eventually poison the other. The question stayed with Claire as HavenBridge expanded. She began delegating instead of answering every call herself. She learned to measure success not by praise but by nights when frightened people remained safely at home. Then, during a freezing rainstorm, St. Catherine called about Leonard Shaw, a 79-year-old trauma patient scheduled for discharge the next morning. His case was complicated. 2 agencies had declined it, and Maria said HavenBridge did not have adequate staff. Claire checked Eleanor's silver watch. Send me the chart, she said. I'll go to the hospital. The discharge plan was signed by a surgeon Claire had never met. Dr. Evan Carter. Leonard Shaw's chart described a successful surgery, stable vital signs, and a discharge planned for 10 the next morning. It did not describe the 3 flights of stairs leading to his apartment. Before accepting the case, Claire drove through freezing rain to Leonard's building. There was no elevator. The stairwell was narrow. The bathroom had no grab bars. And Leonard's wife, June, repeated the same question 3 times during Claire's visit. Their daughter lived nearly 2 hours away. Leonard could not safely reach his bedroom, much less manage the night alone. Claire returned to St. Catherine and found Dr. Evan Carter reviewing scans at the nurses' station. Mr. Shaw's discharge needs to be postponed, she said. Evan looked up. He appeared younger than Claire expected, though exhaustion had drawn shadows beneath his eyes. His surgery went well. Physical therapy cleared him with a walker. For a level surface, he lives on the 3rd floor without an elevator. His wife is at home. His wife may have cognitive impairment, and she cannot support his weight. There's no safe bathroom setup and no overnight help. Evan's expression tightened. Medically, he is ready. Medically ready isn't the same as safely home. The station went quiet around them. Claire expected him to defend the plan. Instead, Evan opened the chart and asked for the address. He called occupational therapy, requested another assessment, and postponed the discharge. The following afternoon, he found Claire beside Leonard's bed. You were right, he said. Claire glanced toward Leonard, who was asleep. About which part? All of it. I was looking at the patient I repaired. You were looking at the life he had to return to. The apology unsettled her more than his resistance had. In the Bennett family, being wrong created blame, not reflection. Leonard remained hospitalized until a temporary rehabilitation placement became available. HavenBridge later coordinated his return home after railings were installed and overnight support arranged. Evan and Claire continued meeting through the hospital's older patient transition program. Their disagreements became quieter and more productive. He taught her what surgical recovery demanded from the body. She showed him how quickly a sound plan could collapse in a kitchen without food or a home without family. After Leonard's case formally closed, Evan invited her for coffee. Is this a meeting? Claire asked. Only if that makes you more likely to say yes. She said yes anyway. Their relationship developed without spectacle. Evan did not try to solve Claire's past, and Claire was unimpressed by the title before his name. She valued that he thanked nursing assistants, remembered custodians, and admitted when he did not know something. On their 3rd date, Claire arrived 40 minutes late because a caregiver had called out. Evan did not complain. He ordered dinner for her, then asked whether she knew how to let anyone help her. 2 months later, he asked why she never mentioned her family. They wanted a version of me I couldn't survive becoming, Claire said. Evan did not tell her to forgive them. Then I'm glad you survived being yourself. 2 years after they met, they married in Eleanor's garden beneath strings of white lights. Maria stood beside Claire. Leonard and June sat in the front row. Eleanor fastened the silver watch around Claire's wrist before the ceremony. A family can be inherited, she said. It can also be built. There were 2 empty chairs where Claire's parents might have sat. She noticed them, allowed herself to grieve, then walked toward Evan. Claire became Claire Bennett Carter. The Bennett remained not as a tribute to her parents, but as proof that they did not own the name or everything that had formed her. HavenBridge expanded through hospital contracts and careful partnerships. By Claire's 28th year, it employed nearly 160 caregivers across 3 Massachusetts offices. Success did not cure her oldest habit. She still answered calls that others could handle and treated exhaustion as evidence of devotion. Evan never asked her to become smaller. He reminded her that being loved was not a wage she had to earn. One autumn evening, Claire called Eleanor after work. There was no answer. She tried again while driving, then a third time from Eleanor's porch. The lights were on. Through the window, Claire saw a teacup broken on the floor. She unlocked the door and found Eleanor beside her chair, conscious but unable to speak. Claire dropped to her knees and called 911. As she reached for her grandmother's hand, the silver watch on her own wrist stopped at 9:17. Eleanor survived the stroke, but the neurologist warned Claire that recovery would be limited. For 3 weeks, Claire sat beside her grandmother in a quiet room at St. Catherine. She understood the monitors and care plans, yet none of that knowledge made her feel prepared. For once, there was no service to arrange, no policy to improve, and no amount of work that could restore what had been lost. Evelyn visited twice. She spoke extensively with the attending physician and corrected a nurse who mispronounced the Bennett name. With Claire, she discussed only Eleanor's insurance documents. On Evelyn's second visit, Eleanor was sleeping. You should go home, Evelyn told Claire. Sitting here won't change the outcome. No, Claire said, but she won't wake up alone. Evelyn looked at the silver watch on Claire's wrist and left without answering. 2 days later, Eleanor woke during the night and motioned for Claire to come closer. Her speech was slow, each word requiring effort. Still think about that frame? Claire wanted to deny it. Instead, she nodded. Sometimes I imagine putting my nursing degree there. Or the magazine article, something that would make her admit she was wrong. Eleanor's fingers tightened weakly around hers. You don't want the frame, she whispered. You want the mother who would have hung anything there simply because it was yours. Claire lowered her head against the blanket. Before falling asleep again, Eleanor said, Don't let what they closed make you close everything. She died the following morning with Claire holding one hand and Maria holding the other. The watch had stopped because the impact from Claire's fall to the floor had damaged its movement. A watchmaker repaired it, but Claire asked him not to polish the case. The scratches belonged to Eleanor's life, and she was no longer interested in making honest things look untouched. At the funeral, Evelyn delivered the eulogy. She praised Eleanor as the mother and grandmother of accomplished physicians. Her 38 years of night nursing received one sentence. After the service, Claire placed Eleanor's old nursing badge beside the urn. Richard approached while the chapel emptied. Your grandmother was proud of you, he said. I know. He seemed relieved until Claire added, I wish that had made the rest of you less ashamed. Richard looked toward Evelyn instead of answering. Grief followed Claire into every room. For several months, she kept working because stillness felt unbearable. Then she remembered how Evelyn's eulogy had reduced Eleanor's life to her relationship with doctors. Claire decided her grandmother's name would stand for something truer. Maria helped her assemble a board that included a social worker, an elder law attorney, a former patient's daughter, and 2 clinicians unaffiliated with HavenBridge. Claire wanted the program to outlive her authority, not become another wall with her name at the center. HavenBridge Foundation provided the initial grant for a 1-year geriatric care fellowship at St. Catherine. The hospital and private donors matched the funding. The program focused on older adults. safe transitions home, family education, and reducing preventable readmissions. Claire named it the Eleanor Brooks Geriatric Care Fellowship. She declined a seat on the selection committee. The hospital would choose the fellow, and Claire would not turn Eleanor's name into personal influence. The selected physician was Dr. Nathan Cole. His application described a patient who had returned to the emergency department 3 times because no one had noticed he could not read his medication labels. Nathan wrote that medicine often celebrated dramatic rescues while overlooking the quiet failures that made rescue necessary. Claire liked the sentence. Nathan communicated with Maria and the foundation staff. His thank you letter arrived while Claire was opening HavenBridge's 3rd office and remained in a folder on her desk. They never met. At a reception she missed because of a staffing emergency. Nathan told Maria he hoped to meet Claire someday. Maria mentioned it, Claire smiled and returned to payroll. To Nathan, the founder listed in the grant documents was Claire B. Carter, a private executive without a photograph on the foundation website. To Claire, Nathan was a thoughtful name in an annual report. Neither knew how close their lives already were. 10 months later, a cream envelope arrived at Claire's home. The calligraphy read, Dr. Evan Carter and spouse. Evan recognized the return address. His mother, Helen Cole, served with him on a hospital committee and was coordinating professional guests for her son's wedding. Claire opened the envelope carefully. The invitation announced a September ceremony in Newport, Rhode Island. Beneath the embossed gold lettering were 2 names, Dr. Nathan Cole and Dr. Madeline Bennett. Claire read them twice. On her wrist, Eleanor's repaired watch continued to tick. Claire left the invitation open on the kitchen table until the September date seemed less like a wedding announcement and more like a deadline. Evan read it again. Nathan worked with me on the older adult trauma program. Helen must have added us from the hospital list. Does Madeline know? That I'm invited? Probably. That you're my wife? I doubt it. During 9 years of silence, the Bennetts had learned almost nothing about Claire's life. She had kept Bennett as part of her legal name, but professionally she was usually Claire B. Carter. HavenBridge carried no family name, and its website featured caregivers and patients rather than a large portrait of its founder. Madeline could have found her with a determined search. She had simply never looked. Claire slid the invitation back into its envelope. We're not going. Evan nodded. All right. His immediate acceptance bothered her. That's it? You don't need my permission to protect your peace. And if staying home isn't peace? Evan waited. Claire carried the question for several days. At work, she caught herself thinking about Newport while approving schedules. At night, she imagined Madeline walking down the aisle beneath Evelyn's approving gaze. If Claire attended, part of her feared she would be seeking revenge. If she stayed away, another part feared she was still obeying the command her family had given her at 19. Disappear until your choices no longer inconvenience us. She placed the invitation beside Eleanor's photograph. What would you do? She whispered. The photograph offered no answer. Eleanor had never made decisions for her. That evening, Claire told Evan the truth. I don't want to ruin her wedding, but I'm tired of treating my existence like an act of aggression. Evan set down his coffee. If you go there to hurt them, don't go. If you stay home because they trained you to disappear, think again. Are you embarrassed by any of this? By you? By where I came from. I'm not ashamed of where you came from. I'm angry they made you believe I might be. Claire accepted the invitation under the name printed on Evan's hospital records, Claire Carter. She did not contact Madeline to announce the decision. That would have turned attendance into a warning or a threat. Claire simply responded to a legitimate invitation sent by the groom's family. Then booked a room under the same married name she used everywhere else. The night before they left, Claire laid out a dark navy dress and rejected 2 brighter ones. Evan noticed but said nothing. She wanted no one to claim she had dressed for attention. Realizing this angered her. Even her clothes were being chosen around the accusations of absent people. She kept the navy dress and cleaned Eleanor's watchband. She established 3 rules for herself. She would not approach her family. She would not volunteer their history to the Coles. And if her presence genuinely disrupted the celebration, she would leave, but not simply because Evelyn ordered her to. On the morning of the wedding, Claire and Evan drove south through New England rain that cleared before they reached Newport. The ceremony was being held at a historic hotel overlooking the Atlantic. White hydrangeas lined the entrance, and valets moved between polished cars. In the lobby, a welcome board displayed Madeline Bennett and Nathan Cole. Claire stopped walking. Behind those names waited the people who had removed her from photographs, redirected her future, and told others that she had chosen to leave. "We can go," Evan said. He did not pull her forward or touch the small of her back. He stood beside her and allowed the decision to remain hers. Claire adjusted Eleanor's watch. "No," she said, "I want to stay." They entered the chapel shortly before the processional and took seats among Evan's hospital colleagues. Claire remained near the back. When Madeline appeared at the doors, everyone rose. For one unguarded second, Claire saw her sister as the girl who once climbed into her bed during thunderstorms. Then Madeline reached Nathan, and the memory closed. She did not notice Claire. After the ceremony, guests moved into a glass-walled room for cocktails. A coordinator checked Evan's name and smiled. "Dr. and Mrs. Carter, you're assigned to table 2. The table was reserved for hospital leaders, mentors, and close professional guests. Claire had not requested it. Across the room, Evelyn turned from a conversation and saw her. Her smile remained in place, but her body went completely still. She set her champagne on a passing tray and approached the wedding planner. "Who put that woman at table 2? Claire heard every word. This time, she did not look away. Evelyn crossed the room without hurrying. To anyone watching, she was a composed mother of the bride welcoming an unexpected guest. She stopped in front of Claire but did not embrace her. "You were not invited here as a Bennett," she said softly. "I know, I was invited as Evan's wife." For the first time, Evelyn looked closely at the man beside her daughter. Recognition moved across her face. Dr. Evan Carter was not merely another wedding guest. He was a respected trauma surgeon at St. Catherine and a member of the hospital's older adult care initiative. "You married him? 3 years ago. Why didn't you tell us?" Claire held her gaze. "You never asked whether I was alive. Asking whether I was married would have been ambitious." Richard arrived before Evelyn could respond. His hair had grayed, but his expression was painfully familiar, the anxious look of a man searching for the fastest way to silence a conflict. "This isn't the time or place," he said. Claire turned to him. "That's what you always say when the truth arrives at an inconvenient time." Madeline appeared behind them, still holding her bouquet. The color left her face when she saw Claire. "I need to speak with my sister," she said. The word sister sounded unnatural in her mouth. Madeline led Claire through a side door into a quiet corridor near the bridal suite. Once they were alone, her bridal composure broke. "Why are you here?" Evan was invited. "You knew what this would do." "I didn't know anything, Madeline. We haven't spoken in 9 years." Madeline glanced toward the ballroom. "Nathan's family thinks I'm an only child." Claire stared at her. "I said I grew up like one." Madeline continued. "Then it became easier not to correct them." "Does Nathan know I exist?" Madeline's silence answered. Claire remembered the unanswered cards, the birthdays that passed without messages, and the Christmas photographs Eleanor had once shown her. In each new picture, the family stood closer together, as if the space Claire left behind had been carefully edited out. Claire asked when she had learned about HavenBridge. "A few months ago, I saw your name in a foundation report." "And you said nothing." "What was I supposed to say? That my family threw out the person who funded his fellowship? That I took the college money meant for her and let everyone pretend she abandoned us?" There was shame in Madeline's voice, but beneath it was resentment. She admitted that her entire life had been built around being the daughter who succeeded. If Nathan discovered what Claire had built after being rejected, he would question everything the Bennetts had told him. For once, Madeline whispered, "I wanted a life where I wasn't waiting for you to prove you were better than me." Claire almost laughed at the cruelty of it. She had spent 9 years believing Madeline never thought about her. Madeline had spent those same years measuring herself against a sister she claimed did not exist. "Tell Evan you have a migraine," Madeline said. "Leave before dinner. Just this once. Don't make everything harder." Madeline's request was not shouted. She sounded frightened, almost young, and for a moment Claire felt the old instinct to protect her. Saying yes would end the confrontation. Everyone could return to the celebration, and Claire alone would carry the cost. Claire walked toward the exit. Her hand reached the brass handle before she stopped. Eleanor's watch ticked against her wrist. She remembered something her grandmother had once told her after a family argument: "Do not confuse disappearing with forgiveness." That recognition steadied her. She had mistaken self-erasure for kindness too many times, and kindness was never supposed to require her own complete disappearance again. Claire turned around. "I didn't come to expose you," she said, "but I won't lie for you. And I won't leave so your lie can survive." When Claire returned to the ballroom, Evan did not ask what had happened. He saw her expression, pulled out her chair, and waited until she chose to speak. Helen Cole approached their table. She greeted Evan warmly, then turned to Claire. "I don't believe we've met. What field are you in?" "Home care," Claire said, "mostly older adult transitions." Evan added, without calculation, "Claire founded HavenBridge." Helen's eyes widened. "HavenBridge? The foundation behind Eleanor Brooks?" Claire nodded. "Nathan has wanted to meet you for nearly a year. I'm on the hospital foundation board. We tried to arrange it twice. Work kept interfering." Helen laughed gently. "Then perhaps tonight has given us one good surprise." Several feet away, Evelyn had heard enough to understand. Madeline had also returned, her face pale beneath her makeup. At the head table, Nathan stood and tapped his spoon lightly against a champagne glass. The room quieted. Helen leaned toward her son and whispered something. Nathan looked toward table 2. His eyes settled on Claire. Nathan waited until the last conversation faded. "Madeline and I want to thank everyone who helped bring us to this room," he began. He thanked their parents, the friends who had traveled, and the hospital colleagues who had covered shifts so physicians in the room could attend. His tone was warm and unpolished. Claire understood why patients trusted him. Then he spoke about an elderly man named Mr. Kaplan. Mr. Kaplan had returned to the emergency department 3 times in 1 month. His medications were correct, his instructions clear, and his follow-up appointments scheduled. No one had noticed that severe vision loss prevented him from reading the labels on 6 nearly identical bottles. "Medicine saved him each time," Nathan said, "but we kept congratulating ourselves for rescuing him from a failure we had helped create." That patient had led Nathan toward geriatric medicine and eventually to the Eleanor Brooks Geriatric Care Fellowship. Claire felt Madeline watching her from the head table. Nathan glanced toward Helen, then continued. "I learned only a few minutes ago that one of the people who made that fellowship possible is here tonight." Guests turned toward table 2. The first truth settled across the ballroom. Claire had not wandered into a family event where she did not belong. She was an invited guest with a direct connection to the groom's work. Nathan explained that HavenBridge had provided the initial funding for his fellowship and helped the hospital build safer transitions for older patients. "HavenBridge didn't make me a doctor," he said. "It helped me become the kind of doctor I hoped I could be." He looked directly at Claire. "Mrs. Carter, would you please stand?" Claire's body resisted. She had spent years avoiding stages and cameras, partly from humility and partly from the belief that visibility invited punishment. Evan did not touch her arm or urge her upward. The choice remained hers. Claire stood. Applause rose from the hospital tables and spread through the room. She did not walk to the microphone. She simply placed one hand over Eleanor's watch, inclined her head to Nathan, and sat again. Across the room, Maria pressed a hand to her mouth. Helen smiled with the satisfaction of someone seeing a long-overdue introduction occur. Evan watched Claire rather than the applauding guests. He understood that standing before strangers was easier for her than remaining visible before the family who had rejected her. That was the second truth. The daughter the Bennetts had described as confused and ungrateful had built the organization supporting the groom's career. Evelyn reacted before the applause ended. She rose with the effortless smile Claire remembered from charity galas. "What a wonderful surprise," she said. "We have always been tremendously proud of what both our daughters accomplished." Claire felt something inside her become very still. Helen turned toward Evelyn. "Both daughters?" Nearby conversations stopped. Helen looked at Madeline. "You told us you were an only child." The champagne glass in Madeline's hand trembled, spilling across the white tablecloth. Nathan did not look at Claire. He looked at his wife. "Is Claire your sister?" Madeline's mouth opened, but Evelyn answered first. "This is a private family matter. Claire chose to leave us many years ago." Claire remained seated. Nathan asked again, more quietly, "Is she your sister?" Madeline stared at the gold band on her hand. "Yes." That was the third truth. And it changed the meaning of everything before it. Nathan's expression did not become dramatic. It emptied. "Did you know she founded HavenBridge?" Madeline whispered, "I found out a few months ago." "And you knew her foundation funded my fellowship?" Madeline nodded. Evelyn turned toward Claire. "Whatever grievance brought you here. There was no need to arrange a public humiliation." Nathan's voice cut through the room. "She hasn't said a word." The accusation collapsed under its own weight. Claire had not exposed anyone. She had accepted an invitation, remained at her assigned table, and answered no public question until that moment. For years, Claire had imagined vindication as the day Evelyn finally regretted losing her. But Evelyn was not ashamed of hurting her. She was ashamed that influential people had witnessed the evidence. Claire understood that no amount of applause could turn that into love. She rose again, this time without being asked. "Nathan, tonight should be about your marriage," she said. "What happens next belongs between you and Madeline. I won't lie if you ask me a question, but I won't turn your wedding into my trial." Nathan studied her for a moment, then nodded. He did not remove his ring or announce an annulment. He placed his unfinished toast on the table. "We will finish the evening for our guests," he told Madeline. "Afterward, you are going to tell me everything." Madeline reached for his hand. He stepped back. "There will be no honeymoon until I know which parts of our life were built on the truth." The band began playing again at Helen's quiet instruction. But the room did not recover. Guests spoke carefully, avoiding the head table while watching it. Claire sat beside Evan. Her hands shook beneath the linen. Not from triumph but from the release of a burden she had mistaken for responsibility. As dinner resumed, Madeline passed behind Claire's chair. "You ruined my life," she whispered. Claire turned to face her. "No," she said, "I stopped disappearing from it." Claire and Evan left before the cake was cut. They had nearly reached the hotel lobby when Evelyn called Claire's name. It was the first time she had used it that evening. "Why didn't you tell us what you had become?" Evelyn asked. Even now, the question centered Evelyn's embarrassment rather than Claire's absence. "Because I shouldn't have needed to become anything for you to admit I was your daughter. Everything I did was meant to protect your potential. You didn't lose me because I lacked ambition. You lost me because my ambition didn't flatter you." Evelyn's face hardened. Claire once would have rushed to soften the sentence. Instead, she allowed it to remain between them. "You made your choice," Evelyn said. "So did you." Claire walked away without waiting for an apology her mother was not ready to offer. Richard found her near the entrance while Evan retrieved their coats. "I signed the paperwork," he said. Claire knew immediately what he meant. "The beneficiary change?" He nodded. "I told myself the money legally belonged to us. I told myself agreeing with your mother would keep the family together. The family broke anyway. You just made sure I was the piece left outside." Richard's eyes filled. "I am sorry." Claire did not say she forgave him. Forgiveness offered simply to relieve his guilt would have repeated the pattern she was trying to end. "If you want a relationship with me, start by telling the truth without asking me to make it easier for you." He nodded. It was not reconciliation, but it was the first honest doorway he had offered her. Nathan cancelled the honeymoon the following morning. He and Madeline lived separately while she told him the history she had hidden: Claire's expulsion, the transferred college fund, the unanswered cards, and the foundation report Madeline had discovered months before the wedding. They began marriage counseling. Nathan did not promise to stay, and Madeline was not granted instant redemption simply because she finally confessed. 6 months later, Claire received a letter in Madeline's handwriting. Madeline did not blame Evelyn, though she acknowledged how thoroughly their mother had taught them to confuse love with achievement. She admitted that Claire's absence had become useful. Without her sister present, Madeline never had to question the price of being the favored daughter. One sentence mattered most. "Mom taught me how to erase you, but I was old enough to know I was holding the eraser." Claire left the letter unanswered for several days. Then she wrote, "If we ever build something new, it has to begin with the truth." It was not forgiveness. It was the possibility of healing without surrendering her boundaries. In the months that followed, Richard began calling once every few weeks. Claire did not always answer. When she did, he listened more than he spoke. Evelyn sent no apology, only a formal card on Claire's birthday. Claire placed it in a drawer without mistaking contact for change. She had finally learned that an open heart did not require an unlocked door for every person who knocked. 1 year after the wedding, HavenBridge and St. Catherine opened the Eleanor Brooks Transition Center. There was no wall of prestigious degrees in the lobby. Instead, visitors saw Eleanor's nursing badge beside a photograph of her wearing white shoes and a tired smile after a night shift. Beneath it were the words, "No one should be sent home alone." Arthur Bell's son attended the opening. Leonard and June came with their daughter. Maria stood near the front, pretending not to cry, while Evan watched Claire address caregivers, nurses, physicians, patients, and families as equals. After the ceremony, a young nursing assistant approached her. "Was nursing your second choice after you decided against medical school?" Claire looked at the photograph of Eleanor. "No," she said. "It was the first honest choice I ever made." Before leaving, Claire checked the repaired silver watch on her wrist. It ran several minutes slow and carried scratches no jeweler had been permitted to remove. The empty frame might still hang in the Bennett home. Evelyn might have removed Claire's plaque or left it beneath a future that had never belonged to her. Claire no longer needed to know. For 9 years, the Bennetts had told the world that Claire no longer belonged in their story. In the end, she did not need to expose them, defeat them, or earn her way back onto their wall. She only needed to stop leaving the room whenever they asked her to disappear.